Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 26 of What If Naruto was in the Bleach universe. If you guys enjoy this What If, and want to see part 27 of it, comment down below, and let me know. Also check out previous parts of this What If. I have created a playlist for this What If, where you can find all the previous parts, link is in the description. And also go ahead and check out other What Ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content, it really means a lot. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. As the sun rose and many Karakura town were still asleep, at least one man was not, as Heidon irritably sat on a bench in Urahara's lab within his shop, eye twitching as little Nell looked up at him, and the stump that used to be his arm. Eventually he had enough of being gawked at by the little girl. What is it? He grits out between gnashing his teeth. What happened to your arm? Wolves. Heidon replied glibly, that's what I get for sleeping outside. He said, blatantly lying without remorse to the young Car. There was no way he was going to say he got his arm cut off out loud, if he didn't have to. Wolves? Nell repeated questioningly in her own way, tilting her head to the side to fit her tone. She had taken a shine to wearing Urahara's bucket hat on top of her head, and said that was tilting dangerously to the point of sinking over her eyes, until she grabbed it and readjusted it. Why are you playing with wolfies, Heidon? Nell. Both Donachaka and Pesche ran into the room and scooped up the little Car, before she wound up bothering Heidon into reacting in some kind of violent fashion given his nature. Sorry about that, Heidon. We'll get her out of your way for you. Pesche said, cang to the scary scowl on the silver-haired man's face. Yeah, Urahara-san will be just a minute, don't you know? Donachaka followed up before both of them sped out of the room with Nell. Hey. Wait, you guys. Nell wants to talk to Heidon some more. As the rapid sounds of fleeing footsteps vanished, Urahara-san's hat popped his head into the lab. Hello. Heidon merely growled at the jovial Shinigami scientist as he ambled in with Tatsuki in tow. Wow, I don't think I've seen anyone, or anything mess up a Gigai like this and remain alive. That's pretty interesting. What was done to my soul by the great Joshin-sama causes flesh and blood bodies that I inhabit to be immortal. Heidon said as if he were repeating himself for the 1000th time. What part of this do you people not understand? Fucking Uzumaki Brad understood the first time I explained. What's your problem? I like hearing you get mad when you explain it. Urahara replied with a huge grin, delighting in the killing intent pouring off of Heidon. Now let's see if we can't fix you up. Tatsuki. At that moment Tatsuki grabbed Heidon and held him down, much to his chagrin and surprise. Especially since the large braided man's face was uncomfortably close to his own. What are you guys doing, and why should I not be killing you right now? We need to fix your Gigai. Tatsuki said casually, though still not moving from pinning Heidon to the ground. It's simply standard procedure, Heidon-san. I don't like standard procedure. Heidon said, a little fearful at his complete inability to move with a 300-pound man on top of him. I think I'll just wait for the Urihime girl to get to Mother Base after school, and let her fix it. It could get infected, Heidon-san. Tatsuki said with a gleam coming off of his glasses. I can't in this body. I'll deal with it. Now, Heidon. Urahara said as he looked over his myriad of equipment that varied in its uses. There's no need for any of that. As long as we hold you down, we can fix your Gigai up, good as new. Then let me out of the Gigai. Problem solved right there. Iriatsu would gain the attention of the Shinigami stationed here, and as far as we know you don't have permission to leave your body, do you? Despite asking, Urahara already knew, or else Heidon wouldn't have gotten his arm cut off in the first place. And even if it would have wound up happening anyway, he would have had a grin on his face, because arm or not he would have killed someone. And you don't have the money to afford a new Gigai of that quality. It's a masterpiece. So please bear with us. You like pain anyway, right? When I'm inflicting it on others, damn you. Mother Base. Naruto was rather torn. On one hand, Yoruichi wasn't pestering him to go to school the way she had been recently, probably because of the Shinigami observation team being there, although on the other hand the Shinigami observation team was there. And they were observing him. More specifically, one person was observing him. Are you sure you wouldn't rather follow someone fun? Like Urahara? I'm sure he'd have you pulling your hair out if you went to see him. Naruto said, walking through the halls with a mug of coffee and testing a new product he was going to try putting out in the market soon. An orange t-shirt with the words ramen fueled on the front in English, and a line-drawn steaming bowl on the back, all in black. Hey, he'd buy it. And there were stupider shirts in the world that sold well. He'd seen them. Sometimes the stupider the better. Shuhei shook his head. I'm supposed to be checking out the administration part of your group. Well, you're the only boss-level person aside from Shiho and Yoruichi, and I spent all of yesterday observing her. You next day. Naruto let out a grunt to let him know he was willing to deal with the situation, and would accept him merely doing his job. Okay, but it's going to be boring today. All I'm going to do is sit on the roof and wait for a sign of something, while my clones do legal paperwork and other crap. He then felt a slight chill go down his spine. Ugh. What's the matter? Shuhei asked, wondering why Naruto stopped mid-stride and shook slightly. You alright? Yeah, fine. Naruto took a sip of his coffee and cracked his neck to the side audibly. I just felt something off and not about. I think. Karakura High School. Later that morning. Tatsuki, why are your lips all singed? Could she get an hour without someone asking her that damn question? And now it was the teacher doing it. Tatsuki scowled deeply, and wished that she hadn't been trying to shoot fireballs all night during training. At least training their Rasengan didn't hurt. I burned myself with some coffee this morning, Ichi-sensei. I'm fine. Ichigo shook his head at Tatsuki as she tried to ignore the pain in her lips, and continued taking notes. The orange-haired Shinigami turned in his seat towards Gaara, who was sitting stoically and writing notes as well. For some reason, unlike Naruto, he took school seriously enough to show up, even though both of them were in the same boat for the most part, and he and the sheet of fart bound last night as well. He couldn't help but slip a grin onto his face as he looked over at Ryu, who seemed to have much more energy that morning, as if he were inspired just to be awake that day. Orihime may have been too tired to come to school after all the effort she put into restoring Ryu's powers, but as far as Ichigo and more than likely Ryu went, she had more than earned the rest she was getting at Mother Base. Ryu felt his stare and looked over at Ichigo momentarily, seeing his grin and managing a small smile of his own, before pretending to ignore Ichigo and getting back to his taking notes. It was weird though for Rukia to be back, even if it was for this mission, mostly because she had inserted herself back into the class with the use of her little memory device. Those notes that Rukia were taking were not for the class, they were on him. And he could only imagine how boring of a read that would be. Ichigo. Upon hearing a low, quiet whispered shout of his name, Ichigo looked around and saw none of his friends trying to get his attention. He then felt a tug on his pant leg, and looked down to see Ririn and the little bird plushie yanking on his leg. Hey, what's the matter? He whispered back, trying not to get into any trouble. About. Ririn whispered heatedly, really close. Hearing that, Ichigo jumped to his feet all rigid and stiff. Uchi-sensei, I need to go to the bathroom, he said with a little more urgency than necessary as all eyes in the room were locked on him due to the awkward outburst. The teacher put her hands on her hips with a frown on her face as she stared down the substitute Shinigami. Ichigo, you just got back from lunch barely 10 minutes ago. You could have used the bathroom back then before class started back up. Just wait until this period is over, could you? Not really. Ichigo thought to himself as he was still standing up trying to think of a decent half-assed excuse to use in order to leave. Finally getting what all of Ichigo's bullshit excuses to leave the class before last summer were all about, Tatsuki wondered how in the world he ever got away with any of that crap. You owe me for this, Ichigo, Tatsuki said, discreetly making hand seals under her desk before taking a deep breath and dreading what was about to happen next. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu. Tatsuki let out a sputtering cough, and a small fireball flew from her mouth. It was a pathetic and useless rendition of the jutsu, but it was still fire, and it was good enough to light the boxes that sat on top of a storage cabinet right by her on fire, setting off the alarm. Fire. One of the students shouted once the sound of the flames crackling caught their attention. The teacher pulled the fire alarm and threw the door open for the students to dart out. Everyone stay calm. Leave the building in an orderly fashion, she shouted as other students began to fill the halls and exit. Ichigo grabbed his bag and was much too eager to head out along with the others. Now all he had to do, since when do boxes spontaneously combust? Being the fastest, and the only one with the general direction of where to go, Ichigo in Shinigami form appeared on a rooftop not far from his school to see a young man standing there leaning against a water tower with a smirk on his face that was mostly hidden underneath his fedora. And here I thought hanging out up here and flexing my Ryatsu would get Uzumaki up here. The young man said, doesn't he snicker go to school here? He skips. Ichigo said, slowly reaching for his Zanpakuto as he could feel the young man's Ryatsu saturating the air. When a bound actually let loose their energy for someone to feel instead of hiding it, it was thick. He skips a lot, and he still has decent grades. It pisses me off whatever your name is. My name is Kane, the young man said as he took off his fedora and set it aside. And I don't want to fight you, I'm looking for Uzumaki. So, I'll let my master have a crack at you. As he said that, a metal female humanoid appeared behind Ichigo, both of her hands spikes as she intended to stab Ichigo clean through and finish him on the spot. Ichigo tried to turn his head to see just as the arms started going down to impale him. Ichigo. The blast of spiritual energy flew at the metal woman and knocked her away from Ichigo, hitting her hard enough to send her right through the metal fence that surrounded the roof to plummet to the ground below. Ichigo turned towards the source of the blast to see Chad standing there, his armored right arm smoking from firing the blast. It now had a different appearance as it still was black with magenta markings, but the extension going up from his shoulder was longer and the arm itself seemed smoother and lacked the protrusions on it that it once had. Way to go, Chad, Ichigo said gratefully, getting a nod from the giant of a teenager, until he noticed the man that had been wearing the fedora seemingly step from Chad's shadow. Wait, look out. Out of my way, useless. Kane shouted before delivering a kick to Chad's back that sent him through the same hole he had just punched in the fence with his powers to fall to the ground below. Hope you enjoy the trip. He shouted at the Mexican young man before noticing Ichigo rush him out of anger with his Zanpakuto. I told you I don't want to fight you already. I don't care what you want. Ichigo yelled as he slashed at Kane repeatedly, watching as he stepped out of the way of his attacks. That was a complete cheap shot. For someone that doesn't want to fight you sure don't act like it. Kane chuckled as he continued to dodge Ichigo's sword strikes with barely a step. A cheap shot. I'm not fighting you to the death honorably. I'll do whatever I have to if it's a matter of me living and my enemy dying, Shinigami boy. Kane then stepped forward one hard time and shot a punch forward at Ichigo's face before hitting nothing but air. Fast. Ichigo reappeared a few steps back, having used flash steps to avoid the punch. After all that training, he wasn't going to let himself get hit that easily. I'm not that easy. Sorry. With that being said, he settled Zangetsu in front of himself and prepared to engage again. You might want a piece of my boss right now, but you'll have to get through me first. He then blinked and palmed his face with one of his hands. Did I just call that idiot my boss out loud? Boss, huh? Maybe if I tear you apart that'll flush Uzumaki out. Kane tried to reason with himself over the pros of fighting Ichigo, and it's been a long time since I've had a battle with anyone worth the time. Eventually he shrugged and a feral grin appeared on his face. Fine. Let's make this quick. I need a warm-up. He walked over to where he had left his hat, keeping an eye on Ichigo in case he tried a reckless attack. Having been prepared to fight, Ichigo was taken aback when he saw Kane pick his hat up and fish something small out of its lining, holding it in a seemingly loving manner in the palm of his hand. What the hell are you doing? He asked. It merely resulted in Kane ignoring him as he used his other hand to gently stroke the small object in his palm. Hey, it's time to wake up. Kane said soothingly. There's someone here that wants to see how amazing you are. Come on, let's show him our power. A rather high-pitched sounding voice yawned and then spoke to Kane in response. Someone wants to see my power? The voice asked curiously before it seemed to wake up, and the tone seemed to turn darker and more ominous. Is it him? Ichigo could feel the reiatsu of the environment darkly shift at that moment, but only for a moment until Kane spoke again. No, Kane said with a slight chuckle, since the little speaker couldn't see who their potential opponent was. It's not Uzumaki. We'll get to him soon enough. Let's warm up on this Shinigami first. You want to show the Shinigami just how great you are, don't you? Well, okay Kane. Just so long as we get to kill him and Uzumaki soon. We will. I promise. Kane said before smirking and looking over at Ichigo. Sorry about that. It's just that she's so lazy most of the time. I have to either convince her to fight or just flat out force her. She's stronger when I can convince her. Her? Ichigo said, began holding Zangetsu in a basic stance with both hands. My doll. Kane explained, holding up a bean-looking creature that had a pair of clearly visible closed eyes on it. He then tossed it high into the air. Show yourself, Wayne. Ichigo watched the bean that had been tossed in the air open its eyes to reveal them as red and brightly glowing. The body of it then began to grow larger and larger, to 3 times his own size, as its body took the form of a praying mantis with 3 long claws at the end of its arms. Wayne landed on the roof with a heavy crash and looked at Ichigo with full intent to maim and kill. And now that Wayne had been awakened, he seriously took a moment to consider Kane's chances of actually defeating Naruto if they were to fight. And he had to admit that they were better than he first figured from his first few moments encountering Kane. But he had to get past Ichigo first. Ichigo saw no way in hell of that actually happening. Not in a million years. Not after all of the training he'd been doing. So, with a smirk growing on his own face, Ichigo ground his feet into the roof of the building they were fighting on and rushed forward at Wayne and Kane. He didn't care which one of them wound up getting in the way of his blade, they were going to be cut down, as long as they stood in front of him. With Chad. Chad stood up off of the ground after his fall from the building due to Kane's kick. He was able to lessen his own impact with the ground by firing a blast of spiritual energy towards it while he was falling, serving the purpose of slowing him down and softening up the ground in the crater he fell into. There wasn't too much cosmetic damage done to him whatsoever as he stood up in the parking lot that he landed in. Someone definitely wasn't driving that car he obliterated to break his fall again though. And as he got up, he looked over and saw the metal humanoid lady with the blade arms getting up out of a crater of her own. Well, he went up onto that roof to help Ichigo fight anyway, so it wasn't like he was unprepared for a battle. Well, look at you. The metal female thing said in a somewhat flirtatious voice as she looked at Chad. You survived that fall, and you've seen me and haven't run yet. This has the potential to be interesting. I agree. He's stronger than other humans. Chad turned towards the entrance of the parking lot to see a large man with an orange mohawk walking towards him. And who are you? Chad asked, now even more on guard since it seemed to be 2-on-1. Was this how the bounce fought? Ryu had neglected to mention that when regaling them of his experience from the night before. Maybe he was just too excited to have his powers back to inform them. My name is Kogaku. The large man said, crossing his arms to show off his rather imposing muscles. And my doll, my partner. He then gestured his head towards the metal woman. Her name is Doc. Well, since they were exchanging pleasantries, Chad saw no reason not to do the same. My name is Sato Yasutora, Koga said, giving Chad his own real name for him, much to the large teen's surprise. I know. We know all of the names of your little group. Korea has been keeping his eye on things around Karakura town for so many years, as have I. You're a dangerous sponge. And with that, Doc launched herself at Chad, although he moved out of the way. Instead of running Chad through with her blade arms like she had intended, she impaled another vehicle with them. Chad took advantage of the missed attack, and with a powerful grunt of effort, he released a blast of energy that hit Doc and knocked the car 20 feet away, flipping it upside down as well. Koga watched the counter from Chad with interest. The pure force behind that attack was pretty impressive. But it wouldn't be that simple to defeat Doc. This turned Chad's attention back to the overturned car, where he saw Doc lift it up off of the ground and seemingly absorb some of the metal from it before hurling it at him. This time when Chad fired a spiritual energy blast from his right arm, he put enough power behind it to knock the car into the air, sending it flying over Doc away from everyone involved in the battle. As he did this, Koga appeared behind Chad, while holding onto a car door, prepared to smash him with it until Chad turned back around and punched a deep dent into the door that might as well have been cheap sheet metal the way it folded around Chad's fist. The impact forced Koga to drop the door and fly back a few dozen yards. With the metal that she had just absorbed from the car, Doc turned her arms into machine guns and proceeded to fire at Chad, who jumped behind a concrete barrier with deceptive speed. The breaks between strength training with Gara for actual combat training was a good idea. The bullets impacting off of the concrete barrier started chipping away pieces of it, decreasing the amount of cover that was available for his use. As the barrier was steadily being picked apart by Doc's murderous fire, Chad lifted his armored right arm and clenched his fingers into a forceful fist, before diving out from behind it boldly and going for Koga again, dodging Doc altogether to get to him. This was a mistake, however. With Doc's bulky metal body, Chad figured that she would be slower than an enhanced human being. That was certainly not the case, as she was fast enough to cut him off and deliver a slash to the side of his body, just as he unleashed another blast towards Koga. Due to the injury, Chad's blast missed wide and didn't get close to Koga and attack against me. He thinks that I'm vulnerable enough to attack directly. He watched as the young man's body impacted off of the ground, blood splattering the pavement along with it. Appearances are deceiving, aren't they? Instead of responding, Chad got up, holding the right side of his chest where his wound was. Doc, you really need to break that habit of playing with your opponents. Oh, come on. Doc said, seemingly amused at her partner's response to her not killing Chad with her strike. What's the point in ending things so fast? Killing him before he even realizes how hopeless his situation is. Boring. I just think you missed. Chad said, bleeding, but not badly enough to get him to stop fighting. Don't use that other thing as your excuse. It was clear that the dolls of the bounce had personalities and tempers from the way that Doc's face twisted into a scowl upon hearing his cool-toned attempt to taunt her. This was going to be a long day. Ichigo versus Kane. Wayton was absurdly strong, as every time Ichigo was forced to block a swing of her claws he feel his bones creak under the strain of her attack. As they clashed again, Ichigo felt the mantis-like doll grab his Zanpakuto between its claws, and left him off of the ground, before chucking him into the water tower, denting it deeply with his body. Come on Shinigami Ichigo. Kane taunted as he watched his doll stalk over to Ichigo to follow up on the momentary advantage. This isn't even worth my time if this is the best you've got. Getsuga Tensho. A black crescent of energy flew at Wayton, and connected with a blast off of the side of the doll's head, sending it falling to the ground. Ichigo stood up out of where he had been thrown into the water tower and cracked his neck. An unamused expression sat firmly on his face. It's a good thing that's not the best I've got then, isn't it? I should be saying that to you right now. Wayton. Kane yelled in alarm as he went to his massive doll's side while it got up, letting out a feral hissing noise. You're alright. The head of the mantis creature nodded, getting a relieved smile out of Kane. I don't ever want you to be hurt again. I promised you that I'd make sure there was no one stronger than you ever again. He then glared over at Ichigo hatefully. Not him, and especially a nobody punk Shinigami like you. Ichigo raised an eyebrow at the angry way Kane kept referring to him. The man he spoke of was Naruto, and you seem to know him pretty well. How do you even know Naruto anyway? He doesn't know who any of you are. He almost ruined everything. He knows what he did, and even if he doesn't, I remember. Kane shouted angrily as Wayton seemed to get bigger as he got angrier, her eyes glowing bright red before Kane pointed at Ichigo. Get rid of him, Wayton. I'm sick of his face. Upon Kane's order, Wayton let out a blast of energy from her eyes directed right at Ichigo. Ichigo went wide-eyed, and used the white blade of Zangetsu to block the attack, but his force still propelled him backwards into the water tower. Only this time it drove Ichigo right through it and out the other side. The humiliation. Kane muttered to himself, glaring at the smoking hole in the water tower he had just blown Ichigo through with Wayton's eye blast. He made me look absolutely pathetic. Flashback. European countryside. 1891. Kane didn't know what he had done wrong. He had followed the instructions for the doll summoning ritual in his master Koga's book step by step, and had been given the diminutive Wayton that refused to show him something amazing like Koga's doll dog. He wanted his doll to show him his power, and when Wayton told him that she would show him her power if he showed him hers, he accepted without question. And now he was facing down Wayton's fully released, imposing form. What he brought upon himself. He was told to never try the doll summoning ritual by himself. He should have listened. And he was frozen in awe and fear, having dropped to his knees as the claws of Wayton descended upon him, set to end his life. Until a strange-looking knife deposited itself into the side of Wayton's head with a thunk. A sizzling sound could be heard until the tag attached to the ring of the odd weapon exploded and knocked Wayton to the ground. I didn't think it'd be that easy to find the monster those villagers hired me to take down. Upon hearing a new voice, Kane turned his head to find a blond spiky-haired man standing on a tree branch. He wore a white button-up shirt, brown slacks with black suspenders, a black fedora on his head, barely taming his hair down, vibrant blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. "Who are you?" he asked, completely overwhelmed at having his life saved from his own out-of-control doll by this odd man in the tree. A grin that showed off sharper than normal canines came upon the face of the newcomer as he stood ramrod straight with one hand pointed directly up into the air. "If you don't know me, you're about to be educated, my friend. From the sands of Spain to the steppes of Russia, from the wilds of American Oregon to the arid lands of Mexico, the men love to hate him, and the ladies simply love to love him. The greatest man alive and your best friend in the world right now, the raging sage of 6 paths. My name is..." The claw slashing at his tree and felling it cut off the man's introduction until he jumped from the branch of the tree and nailed Wayton hard in the head with a kick that again knocked the doll to the ground. Kane's eyes went wide at how this was going. It wasn't possible for any human to possess strength like that. It's just impossible. How's he able to do when even I wasn't able to? Giving the skittering Wayton the stink eye as she tried to get back up, Naruto turned his head and spit on the ground sardonically, before finishing his introduction. "Ugh, just call me Uzumaki Naruto. I mean Naruto Uzumaki. I forgot how you Europeans put your surname last. Now what is this thing and how should I kill it?" The question of how to kill Wayton struck fear in Kane's heart for more than one reason. He didn't want to die. He didn't want to die without seeing the magnificent power that he knew Wayton had, and having the opportunity to use it firsthand to improve his life. "Don't kill her. Please, whatever you do, don't kill Wayton. I beg of you," he pleaded, grabbing Naruto's pant leg to beg him more appropriately. Naruto looked down at him with a squinted eye gaze, before turning that look up towards Wayton. "Okay, fine. I'll give this thing the benefit of the doubt. Not all monsters are bad, and I didn't hear about this thing killing anyone. But I've still got to stop it." He looked down at Kane and shook him off of his leg. "Stay here." For a moment Kane could swear that he saw Naruto's eyes turn from blue to an abnormal purple with a ripple pattern. He had no time to really dwell on it, nor question Naruto about it, since the blonde sprang into action so suddenly his hat flew off of his head. His attention momentarily distracted by the hat, he looked back at the scene of the battle in time to see Wayton's claw go through a puff of smoke right before Naruto, who was above Wayton's head, held a very large ball of blue spinning light in his hand, and slammed it down on the mantis-like. "Doll, you're all filler, no substance. Giant Rasengan." With a force Kane didn't know was humanly possible, Naruto smashed a crater into the ground that kicked up dust and debris all around, and generated a shockwave that knocked Kane from his knees onto his back. Kane shielded his eyes before concern kicked in. "Wayton." He got up from his place on the ground and ran towards the smoke and the crater, not even thinking that if Naruto had destroyed Wayton, he would have died too. When he reached the crater, he found Naruto standing in it holding the small bean-like form of Wayton's original sealed form in his hand. She looked very beat up, and her eyes were once again closed to show that she was sleeping. Seeing this, Naruto shook his head. "You know, this reminds me of something, a fight only to put something to sleep after I'm done." He then saw Kane at the end of the crater, and threw Wayton at him. Kane caught his doll shakily and cradled her close to him with tears in his eyes, as Naruto jumped out of the crater. "That thing is really precious to you, huh?" Not answering verbally, Kane just nodded and gave Naruto all the answer he needed. "Well, take care of it. That's all I can say." He didn't know how long he stood there cradling Wayton, and he didn't know quite when Naruto had left, but before he knew it, he found himself grabbed by his shoulders and turned around to face an angry Koga. "You fool." He proceeded to punch him right in the face. "I told you not to attempt to summon your doll without me present." Instead of arguing, or tuning it out, Kane just stood there, and took his berating, only speaking up once Koga was thoroughly finished. "I'm sorry, Master Koga. I'll do anything you ask me to from now on. I just want to get stronger." And with that he started walking home at a demure pace to the surprise of Koga. "I'll get strong enough to use Wayton's power for real. She'll never be hurt the way he did again because of me. I swear it. Only I should be the one to be able to tame my power. No one else. I'll become stronger than you, Naruto. Me and Wayton. You'll see." As he left the clearing, he saw Naruto's fedora that had flown off laying on the ground. He stared down at it with a harsh glare and took off his own cap, throwing it aside before picking up Naruto's fedora and planting it firmly atop his head, continuing on without a word. Then flashback. I trained every day to get strong enough to control Wayton, just to beat him. Kuryu told me exactly who that man was when he came to get me in Master Koga. I'll kill him. Kane said, his eyes taking on a red glow just like Wayton's, and I'll kill you too, Kurosaki Ichigo, for getting in my way. He saw Ichigo's body appear from the other side of the water tower Wayton had blasted him through, blood running down his forehead, but it didn't seem to be bothering Ichigo one bit, as his face was stained with crimson. That's why you got your power. You trained your ass off for 100 years to kill someone because he saved you from your own dumbest mistake. He felt like laughing if it wasn't so pathetic at heart. It's worked out for me. A manic grin appeared on Kane's face. I'm the strongest bound of them all. Kuryu may on things, but that's not because he's the strongest, it's because I just don't care. I don't care about his little vendetta with the Shinigami. I don't want to even think about my past. All I care about is the future, and my future has me proving that I'm the strongest immortal being alive. You're pathetic, Ichigo said distastefully, ignoring the blood coming down his face as he stared at the increasingly sociopathic bound. Is this what immortality turns you into? All those years alive, and you never thought to do anything for anyone other than yourself and your own power. I guess having eternal life makes you a selfish prick in the end. What do you know? Laughed Kane at the thought of Ichigo trying to lecture him. You're barely old enough to wipe your own ass and take the velcro off of your shoes, and you're trying to tell me about my life. When you live, as long as me, as long as us, you learn that you can do anything you want. And you have to realize that you can't do just anything to make the time pass, to make the years go by. It doesn't work like that. You need a focus just to keep from being driven mad. Something to dedicate yourself to. Master Koga, I don't know what his focus used to be, but it became trying to mold me into the pride of the bounce. It kept him sane, just like my goal did for me. That sounded terrible. And there went the last dregs of Ichigo's childish past thoughts of how cool it would be to have eternal life. It had been slipping away ever since he could begin to see ghosts as a kid, and that was the last of it right there. It sounds like a curse. Call it what you want, Kane said, shaking his head. You could call it a curse or a burden. I like to call it an opportunity, because I had all the time in the world to match the man I want to kill, and a baby Shinigami like you can't stand up to me. Wayton, let's ice this pretender. He ordered, frothing slightly at the mouth as he did so. With pleasure. Wayton again seemed to grow in size and attack Ichigo with all claws in a reaper-like sweeping motion that Ichigo wasn't going to avoid, not with the angle that both of the claws were coming at him with. Ichigo jumped over one claw and stabbed Zangetsu into it, pinning the appendage to the roof, while he took refuge on one side of the blade to block the second sweeping attack. But Wayton's strength had grown again along with her size. The crazier he gets, the stronger this doll gets. It's like he's losing himself to his own power. As he continued to struggle against the claw, he noticed Wayton begin to hiss dangerously, and saw her eyes glow bright red again. Crap. Die? Kane shouted at Ichigo as Wayton fired another energy blast from her eyes at the exposed Ichigo. He began laughing maniacally as he couldn't see Ichigo's figure through the smoke from the previous attack. Korea. Who needs your stupid Bido? I'm the strongest even without it. Nobody can beat me. Bankai, Tensa Zangetsu. Kane heard Ichigo's low voice and turned to see him standing there now wearing a long-sleeved, ankle-length black coat with red lining, instead of his Shinigami uniform. His Zanpakuto was jet black, and was smaller and thinner than it had been before with a small chain at the end of the hilt. This is a Shinigami's bankai. It's my bankai, yes. Ichigo said matter-of-factly as he held up his sword or cane. There's no need for you to look for Naruto. I'm all you need right here. So, if you're the strongest, why don't you show me just what that means so I can crush you? What Tatsuki? Why does Ichigo have to be so fast? He could have waited. Tatsuki questioned as she ran in the direction that she could feel Chad and Ichigo's power coming from. Unlike the others, she was clearly not used to slipping away from school unnoticed, even with the major distraction she laid down. Naruto had better not ever find out how much trouble she had getting away, or else he'd drill her into the ground on something other than direct fighting, the only thing she was really interested in. But with Chad and Ichigo, whatever they were fighting, it was definitely making them exert some effort with the output they were generating. She could feel their Ryatsu from school. Fearing for her friends and their safety, she took to cutting through a nearby children's park that was deserted at that time of day to reach them faster. She was exceedingly quicker after training so long with Naruto, faster than any normal human by 10 times at least, but when compared to Ichigo it was still pretty messed up. Tatsuki absently wondered if there was a way that Naruto could teach her how to fly later. As she ran, Tatsuki heard the familiar noise she had grown accustomed to during her training of the faint sound of metal whistling through the air. The lucky identification of said noise prompted Tatsuki to stop running forward, and to duck behind the side of a nearby vending machine at a restroom area as several thick needle-like projectiles stuck themselves in it, having been aimed at Tatsuki. With a growl, Tatsuki poked her head out to see a woman with dark green long hair wearing Chinese-looking clothing, and holding an iron-tipped fan and a jan connected by a chain standing at the top of a children's swing set. Oh, how precious. You look mad at me, sweetie. I'll show you mad. Tatsuki said heatedly as she dropped her backpack and took out a sealing scroll, quickly summoning her trench knives and holding them, ready to fight. I beat one of your jackass friends the other night. I can beat you too. You think that's such an accomplishment? Yashi said with a smirk on her face. Ryo was an arrogant idiot, and you had help from a weakened Shinigami and a powerless Quincy. Useless backup for sure, but better than nothing for someone like you. And now you don't even have that. I don't need backup to beat someone like you. Well, Tatsuki may have just been saying that, she had no other choice, but to believe it at the moment. Ichigo and Chad were indisposed, and she had no idea where Ryu and Rukia had gotten off to. This fight would have her going solo, because Yashi did not look like she was going to be letting Tatsuki go. Great. Perhaps sensing Tatsuki's apprehension at fighting a supernatural foe alone, Yashi's smirk grew, and she beckoned Tatsuki forward with her fan. Come on then, let's see how entertaining you are. Entertaining? A tick mark grew on Tatsuki's head before she came out from behind her cover of the side of the vending machine, and flexed her hands, gripping her trench knives tightly. Bitch, I'll show you entertaining right now. Seeing the angry look on Tatsuki's face at being underestimated and swung her fan at Tatsuki, sending out more metal projectiles from the iron tips of the weapon. A disappointed look came over her face when they hit Tatsuki, stabbing into her, but it turned to an expression of surprise when Tatsuki's body was concealed in a puff of smoke, and a log dropped to the ground in her place. The surprised look gave way to Yashi backflipping out of the way of a rising uppercut from Tatsuki, ending up with both of them on the same pole of the swing set as Tatsuki began to attack her, managing to keep her balance while doing so. Tatsuki let loose two punches that Yashi dodged before delivering a kick to Tatsuki's stomach that sent her stumbling back on the narrow surface they were fighting upon. To follow up, Yashi let loose a few slashes with her sword that Tatsuki managed to dodge two strokes from before blocking with her trench knives in a cross pattern. Tatsuki then went low with a sweep, but Yashi simply jumped over her and kicked her from behind, knocking her forward and off of the swing set beam. Upon hitting the ground, Tatsuki rolled through and back to her feet, simultaneously dodging a falling stab of Yashi's sword as she tried to finish her, after knocking her down. Upon getting to her feet, Tatsuki pressed forward and attempted a blistering assault of punches with her trench knives, gritting her teeth, as Yashi was able to divert the deadly attacks with her fan. You're not bad, but you're a few centuries too soon to even bother trying to fight me. Yashi boasted as the sound of the metal of her fan sliding against the blades of Tatsuki's trench knives filled the playground. The gap's just too wide for you to overcome. She continued as they clashed weapons again. From the corner of her eye, Tatsuki saw Yashi's sword hand shift. She was going to attack with her sword again. Tatsuki used one of her trench knives to punch it where she saw the trajectory of the sword going, and channeled chakra to her fist, delivering a blow that sent Yashi spinning off of her, knocked off guard. Pins and needles were felt all throughout Yashi's right arm, after Tatsuki punched her sword away. She shook the arm out while glaring at her adversary. That punch wasn't bad at all. The sword said in a male voice. Shut up, Nader. Yashi said to the sword as she continued to stare Tatsuki down, so her punch is as strong as a gorilla's. It won't matter when I cut those arms off. Along with the threat, Yashi went back at Tatsuki, probing her with a high-aimed kick that Tatsuki ducked. This led to Yashi spinning through and delivering a low kick with the same leg that Tatsuki was able to block somewhat with her forearms. She does know what she's doing though. Should we make this more difficult? This time as Nieder spoke, it was in a feminine voice coming from the fan. It's time to go on the offensive. Difficult. Offensive. Tatsuki then saw the right arm of Yashi gain a light blue sleeve that went up to wrap around her mouth with a green metal plate covering her shoulder. The sword in her hand began to glow yellow, and 6 more glowing yellow swords began to trail in a clockwise arc, hanging in the air. Oh, damn it. Yashi fired one of the light swords off at Tatsuki, forcing her to dodge before it could hit her. The missed attack hit a slide and destroyed it, letting Tatsuki witness the first really supernatural thing she had seen from her opponent. She's a close-range fighter with a range technique. And she was certain that those other swords hanging around the real one in Yashi's hand wasn't there for just show either. Mother base. Guess, / recruit, living quarters 4. Still exhausted from expending so much energy the night before to return Ryu's powers, an unconscious Orihime had been taken to a room to rest. The sleeping girl lay completely unaware in a bed in the room provided to her. However, right next to her bed in a chair, that seemed to be made of stone, the old man Sawatari sat, seemingly observing her. What a lovely creature. I assumed her soul would be something of a delicacy. He was able to get right past whatever defenses the base had and up to find Orihime, due to the tint of her spiritual energy. The elderly-looking bound reached his hand out to Orihime to grab a hold of her collar, in order to pull her towards him. Just as he did so, however, the door to the room was kicked off its hinges, and in flew a mop of blonde hair with a kunai drawn. Sawatari dropped Rihime back in her bed and blocked the weapon strike with his walking stick before smashing his attacker and sending them right through the back wall window outside. Scoffing as he knew the combat traits of his attacker, he stood up out of his strange chair and walked over to the hole in the window and wall to look down at his failed assailant. That was Uzumaki Naruto. What simple bait to fool him, and how easy it was to defeat him. You really thought that was Naruto? Sawatari abruptly turned around only to be socked right in the face by a feminine, dark-skinned hand that sent him flying out of the hole in the wall he had just created himself. Yoruichi cracked her knuckles with a satisfied look on her face until she saw a massive whale that seemed to be covered in rock jump out of the street of the abandoned district that the main base sat in, as if it were water, catching Sawatari on his back before descending back into the street without a trace in the same manner. A scowl formed on Yoruichi's beautiful face as she looked at the sleeping Orihime. When that old man walked in, she was able to hide out of his sight until he tried to make a move, and the distraction from Naruto didn't hurt either. Speaking of Naruto, Yoruichi looked down at the person on the ground from being knocked outside by Sawatari. Naruto, are you going to be alright? She asked. Naruto transformed back into the top hat wearing Mod Soul's given Gigai as he stared up at Yoruichi from where he was laying flat on his back on the grass 5 stories below. I'm fine. He sensed the man inside of the building and rushed to find him, taking Naruto's guise to attack him since it was one of the most instantly battle-ready guises he could don with his shape-shifting powers. Too bad his abilities weren't close to the real ones in comparison. I could use a kiss to help me heal though, he ventured with a painful yet lecherous grin. He was fine if he was able to joke. Yoruichi shook her head and jumped down to where Naruto was with Anil, getting close and making him believe she was actually going to acquiesce to his request. Though she just retrieved his Kakongan from the Gigai and placed it in the rabbit-like purse for mobility purposes. Maybe later you can ask Orihime for one, when you tell her you saved her, but for now you're coming with me to tail that bound. Mama's got to go fight. Naruto in rabbit purse form pointed an ear/strap in the direction where he could feel Sawatari's energy, and Yoruichi scooped him up before giving chase with flash steps. Meanwhile, the roof of Mother Base. When Sawatari was punched out of the hole in the wall, Naruto saw it and witnessed the whale-like creature catch him out of the air before vanishing into the ground. Naruto stood up with his eyes showing that he had been in sage mode and he could sense the multiple conflicts going on around Karakura town. He would have left, but he still had Shuhei watching his moves. Naruto's cell phone went off and he picked it up with a serious look on his face. Yeah. He listened to the person on the other line for a moment before letting out a sigh. You killing me here, Heidon? More silence as he listened again. Fine, do it. He hung up and turned to Hisagi, who was also aware of the fights going on. Are you going to help me out here? Shuhei frowned and reluctantly shook his head. I would, but I have strict orders not to fight, unless I'm attacked first. How strict? Strict enough for a double limiter placed on our persons before we all left the Serte. I'd have to call it in and convince them it was an emergency. Naruto nodded. Then could you go inside and make sure Rihime stays safe for me? And don't come outside. As a matter of fact, take her to the training room in the basement. He didn't want to be that guy that tried to command someone that wasn't even on his team in the first place, but his tone let it be known that if he wasn't going to fight, it was in his best interest to do so. Shuhei didn't know why he was asking him to do so since the fights were nowhere near them, but when Naruto put a hand on his shoulder and momentarily transferred his ability to sense negative emotion, he immediately understood why. This seriously doesn't sit well with me letting you do this by yourself. It's not your fault, Naruto assured him with a weak grin. You've got to do what you've got to do. With that, Shuhei hustled his way downstairs and left Naruto alone on the roof. Or so it seemed. The moment it was clear that no one else would be coming for help or arriving to interfere, a powerful blast of fire went right at Naruto and engulfed him and the entire roof of the base, only to be absorbed into a scroll that Naruto had prepared with a sealing array on it, fire sealing method. As the fire vanished from sight into the scroll, it revealed that Gerda was right behind Naruto on the roof. The fiery punch from the flame-based doll went right through Naruto and revealed him to be Kage Bunshin when it dispelled into a puff of smoke. On the ground in an alley near Mother Base, Yoshino glared up at the roof of said building, just waiting for the next move to be made until she could sense the shift of Naruto's palpable energy signature, while in sage mode move right behind her in the hiding place. She turned to face him with an angry glare as he stood still and simply stared her down with his odd eyes. Why did you come here? He asked uncharacteristically stoically. Is this all a part of the bounce plan to take us all out? I don't care about the other bounce or their plans. I just care about making you pay. Yoshino said before beginning to attack Naruto with her bare hands. Showing underplayed skills in hand-to-hand combat, she went right at Naruto, forcing him on the defensive as he slapped away her every punch and kick directed at him, before letting one land on his cheek, turning his head to the side and leaving a scuff mark on his cheek, but other than that not hurting him much to her surprise and chagrin. It was a strong punch. Definitely the strongest punch she had been hit with by a living person in centuries. But in Sage mode she needed more power if she was going to try and hurt him with a physical attack, or Ryatsu that could match the energy flowing through him at the moment. However, it was just a side to give Gerda time to blaze his way over from the base, and drop down with an attack all for Naruto, as he gathered fire beneath himself and pressed the ground with a stomp, looking to crush and incinerate Naruto as Yoshino jumped away. Yoshino watched Naruto jump from wall to wall in order to scale to the roof and grit her teeth, doing the same in a way as she jumped off of a wall, before easily scaling a fire escape. Gerda, stop him. Gerda turned his feet into afterburners and lifted off of the ground to quickly go after Naruto. Only when he made it up over the room, he was blasted with a forceful wave of chakra. When Yoshino peeked her head above the corner of the roof, she went wide-eyed when she saw Naruto's right arm as a laser cannon like something out of a sci-fi movie, until the skin went back around it, making him seem like some kind of cyborg. Naruto's eyes turned from where he had shot Gerda into 3 large pieces on another rooftop and towards Yoshino, showing his Rinnegan eyes in what she perceived as a cold stare until his gaze seemed to soften. Yoshino, I don't want to fight you. Please just stop. Did he really believe it would just be that simple? That he could say that he didn't want to fight, and that would be that? This was her desire. She wanted him to hurt as much as he had hurt her by just leaving her behind. The only person she ever thought knew what it was like to be somewhat like her, and now that she knew they had even more in common than she thought, with the immortality and the abilities, it just made her all the more angrier. You can't just have my forgiveness that easily. Yoshino said as she pulled herself up onto the roof, not choosing to back down from him the way he had requested. I've lived for so long, for so many years, before I ever even met you. The loneliness was crushing, and there are so many things that I can't even remember anymore, but I remember you, the kind reclusive mercenary outside of my old village. But I was just a burden you couldn't wait to get rid of, right? That's not true. Naruto said, narrowing his eyes at her. I thought you were mortal. I've seen so many people I've tried to befriend over the years die. Well, I just stayed the same. I'm sick of seeing that happen. I couldn't do it again, and you just spent so much time with me I figured it would happen again. He then shook his head and held its sides. But it wasn't my fault, Yoshino. I had to leave. You could have taken me with you. I thought you were a regular human, and if I took you with me, a normal human would have been killed. Naruto snapped in return. I had to outrun Frederick's standing army. I was a domestic threat. A terrorist to him, because of the things that I did to try and stop the 7 Years' War. They found out I was staying near your village, and they were coming for me. He felt his anger spike and realized what had happened the last time it had done so. Come on, calm down. Don't call on that power here. Don't draw on the Jinchuriki form in anger. It'll just wake him up faster. Yoshino just shook her head, as if she didn't want to hear it, and Gerda reformed and landed in front of her in a blast of fire. It doesn't matter. If you had taken me with you, you would have seen my powers and learned what I was. If you had taken me with you, my heart wouldn't have been broken. Her heart? Naruto thought in alarm as she continued to speak. And if you had taken me with you, I wouldn't have been so pathetic enough for that man to take advantage and make me believe in what he was saying. Then, as if she had really come to terms with what she was about to do, Yoshino's eyes hardened on Naruto's form with a new sort of resolve. But even now, if it will make you realize just what you really did to me, by running away without even saying goodbye, I'll fight with him, because I can't beat you by myself. So, there would be another one to try and take him on as well. That certainly didn't reassure Naruto very well. He might have to get further away from Mother Base, if he were going to fight him. Naruto extended his senses and was shocked to find that with Yoshino and Gerda saturating the vicinity with their Ryatsu, he didn't register the close presence of another until then, even with the sensitive abilities of his to feel energy while in Sage mode. Naruto turned around to see a man standing on the same rooftop as him, Yoshino, and Gerda. In his hand he held a strange weapon with a wind blade and a hilt that looked like some kind of symbol, but his armament was not what really got Naruto's attention. What caught Naruto's notice were the pair of sharp red eyes, the white hair, and the vertical scar on the left side of his chin. You too. This can't be right, he said to himself quietly, as if he were trying to convince himself. Yoshino, my dear, I hope you haven't been having too much fun with our dear friend Naruto without me. You always were too hasty most of the time. I told you to wait until every other part of this assault was set. Ignoring Naruto's stunned visage, the new rival addressed Yoshino. I don't have to wait for you, Korea. Yoshino said, not showing any sort of affection for one that was to be her comrade. Your plans don't mean anything to me. I'm only even doing this for myself for one reason. Still, despite the banter between the two bounce, Naruto's head was swimming as he dredged up the last time he had seen Koryu's face. Flashback. Prussia. 1758. You telling me they know where I am? A panicked Naruto said, hopping to his feet out of his chair in his small hut in the woods outside of Yoshino's village. Today he found that he had been visited by one of his better informants on what was going on around the capital of this country. It helped to get rumors on any possible offensives from the Prussian military, to help him know when to make his own moves to try and end the war, as it was really beginning to get out of hand. There's just no way. I made absolutely sure I wasn't being tailed before doubling back after my last mission. They should think I fled to Poland. I don't know what to tell you, Naruto. This is what I've learned from my sources in the court. I raced here, as soon as I could, as a force is being mobilized now. They believe that you have more than just yourself, and that, wherever they catch wind of you being, is the cradle of your operations. If they find you here, they'll raise this village to the ground for treason due to you staying here. Naruto punched a hole through his wall out of anger. I can't let them do that. He let out a desperate sigh, and massaged his scalp, before getting up and pacing around. How long? A day behind me. I had to go to painstaking efforts to slip past them unnoticed, you know. A nod of understanding came from Naruto as he went over to a table, and grabbed a satchel, that he threw to his informant gratefully. I have to go now then. I can't let them get sight of me somewhere around here. I just can't. He pasted a sad smile on his face as he extended his hand to the man. There's no way I can really repay you for all you've done for me. You're the most stand-up man I've met in years. Take care of yourself, Eugene Courier. Eugene stood up and took Naruto's hand in a hearty shake with a smile of his own on his face. You don't have to worry about me one bit, Naruto. You can trust me when I say I know exactly what I need to do to stay alive. In a gentleman's dress, he had long white hair, sharp red eyes, and a vertical scar on the left side of his cheek. In Flashback, Courier finally looked at Naruto and smirked at his expression. What's the matter, Naruto? It's been such a long time and you've got nothing to say to an old friend. As a matter of fact, you look like you've seen a ghost. Yeah? Naruto said weakly with a minor humorless quirk of his lips. I've been getting a lot of that these days, actually. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.